Okay, today we're going to be doing a quick fire review on the Hoka Skyflow, which I think for the most part has kind of fallen between the cracks, kind of between the Clifton and the Bondi, overlooked for the most part. I picked this one up about 2 months ago now. I've done about 70 Ks on it, so I wanted to give you some full thoughts, running through it top to bottom, price point, comparisons, pretty much letting you know whether you should pick this one up, maybe on discount, or go for something else instead. Starting off with some quick specs, this is a high cushion daily trainer, 40 mm of foam in the heel, 35 in the forefoot, 5mm drop. We've got a supercritical EVA foam here, which feels quite stiff and firm, doesn't necessarily feel like a super foam, does have maybe a little bit more bounce back than a standard EVA. In terms of the weight, we're coming in at 295 grams on my men's size 10.5, which means that we're about average for a daily trainer in my size. Starting off with the upper, we have quite a thick, stiff, unstretchable upper material. Doesn't have a lot of give, which does mean that the fit is quite dialed in. Heel count is reasonably stiff. I like the Achilles padding, how it flares away from the heel. Padded through the tongue, protects you from the laces. The lockdown here is very, very secure, both because of a slightly narrow fit, but also because of how structured and stiff the upper material is. In terms of the length, it fits true to size, pretty much in line with every other Western brand. Nike, Hoka, Asics, Saucony all seem to fit quite similarly in terms of that length, but in terms of the width, as I mentioned before, it is snug. Pretty standard for Hoka, especially in that kind of transition zone between the midfoot and forefoot. Right in the widest point of your forefoot, you might feel a bit of a squeeze right on the bone. So if you've had problems in the past with Hoka's fit, this is not going to change anything for you. It's not wide foot friendly. It hasn't got much accommodation. If you have a standard foot or a narrow foot, you might be at home, but everybody else, I do think this might be a little bit too snug. Overall for me, I do enjoy the kind of dialed in fit that this shoe offers. Small complaints would be the width. I think we could have a bit more room up front, but also maybe a little bit of a lack of breathability in this upper material. Did mean that it was quite a sweaty shoe during the middle of summer. But other than that, it's protective, it's comfortable, it locks in really well. I do like how dialed the fit is, and so overall, yeah, it's doing pretty well. Moving down to the midsole, this supercritical EVA foam gives quite a stiff, simple, direct ride underfoot with a slight rockering to it, which feels pretty good at up-tempo daily training paces, moving into longer runs especially. I think the firmer feel here really suits those longer runs because it has the stiffness and structure to keep on going, softening up a little bit over the course of the run, which is not something that can be said for a lot of these other modern day daily trainers, which I think are moving more towards that kind of plush, soft end of the spectrum, which is not always useful, at least for some people. So I find the firmer feel here to be a little bit nicer for myself, a little bit more usable for those longer range efforts. It's not a super bouncy foam, it's not super engaging. It does have a little bit more spring back just on merit of being firmer, so the response is quite quick, and I think for that you can pick up the pace a little bit more than other high cushion shoes, so Nova Blast 5 or maybe a 1080. I do think that you get a bit more of an immediate bounce back, but it's by no means a kind of dynamic, fun, super trainer in any way. This is definitely a more traditional feeling daily trainer. The rocker here is definitely not as pronounced as in other Hoka shoes that I've tried. A little bit more late stage than a Clifton or even a Bondi, just trying those on around the shop. I feel like it's a kind of last minute tip off the toe, which just keeps things quite smooth. Quite similar actually in feel to the Super Blast in terms of that kind of last minute toe off. I think it is quite a stable shoe as well. That will definitely be one of the highlights. Firmer foam isn't going to give out too much on either side and over compress. Bit of a wider base, some slight midsole sidewalls, and a bit more of a kind of stiff, smooth transition. I think most people are going to find this shoe to be quite comfortable as a kind of stable, neutral daily trainer, which doesn't have the kind of intrusive arch elements that some of the more kind of traditional stability shoes have. It's simple, it's stable, it's got a firmer feel underfoot, which is going to appeal to some people, but it's by no means a kind of fun, exciting trainer, which definitely does kind of leave it in a bit of a weird zone between those entry-level daily trainers and the more fun, exciting kind of super trainers that are coming out right now. Moving down to the outsole, this pod rubber setup does a pretty good job in terms of grip, Some slightly wetter conditions here in Perth, dry footpaths, some gravelly stuff. I think it's done pretty well. I do think the application here is much thicker than I've seen in the past from Hoka. A little bit more connected, so I don't think it's going to peel up quite as easily. And I do really appreciate the attention to detail here on the lateral edge of the heel with some really thick, stout rubber covering, which I think is going to hold up to the test of time. In terms of durability overall for this shoe, I imagine I'm going to get slightly higher than usual here. So I'm thinking 800, 850 Ks. Firmer foam isn't going to bottom out as much because it doesn't have as much compression to begin with. And this rubber setup I do think is going to do pretty well. As long as you're not taking it on anything crazy, I do think some gravel running might chew up this exposed foam a little bit quicker. So overall, outsole for me has been pretty good. Coming around to the price point, $280 here in Australia, I think puts this shoe in a really awkward position on the current market. I think it's too expensive to be competitive with other entry-level daily trainers, which have quite a similar ride, that kind of simple, stable, straightforward feel. Things like the Saucony Ride 18, Magnify Nitro 2, Adidas Adistar 3, they all have a similar feel, but are coming in at $200 to $220. But then compared to other more premium shoes, things like the Neo Zen and other super trainers with exciting, engaging foams, I guess even the Evo SL now for $240, it doesn't really stand up to those either. So it's just kind of in this weird no man's land where it's too expensive to be entry level, too boring to be fun and exciting and engaging as a high price point super trainer. I just don't really know who's going to be searching for this shoe specifically. I do enjoy the ride of this shoe, don't get me wrong. I've had a pretty good time, especially in those longer runs, the kind of firmer, resilient feel opening up over the course of the run. Had a really good time, but for $280, I just don't think I can overlook it in favor of some other cheaper models which can do a very similar job. And that's pretty in line with my criticism of Hoka over the past couple of years. This EVA foam is definitely running its course, and I think they do need to start innovating and including some more exciting foams in their daily trainers or drop the price point. Otherwise, they're going to get left behind. So for $280, I would not recommend grabbing this full price in favor of other shoes like the Ride 18, Magnify 2, Adistar 3, Supernova Prima or Supernova Rise. They've all got that kind of traditional, stable, kind of comfy daily training feel. But on discount, if you can get it for, you know, $200, $220 at that entry-level daily trainer price, I think this could be okay. If someone sent me this shoe in the mail without the branding, without the Hoka styling, I think I would price this shoe at around that $220, $230 mark, just blind testing. And so I think if you can pick it up for that, that should be a pretty good deal. Jumping into a couple of quick fire comparisons, we'll start off with the Ride 18, which is a little bit flatter through the forefoot, wider in the midsole base, maybe a bit more responsive in the midsole. This TPU foam does have a bit more juice to it, but you do have to put a bit more force into it and kind of snap down into it in order to get that rebound back. I do think the Skyflow is better over the longer runs with a smoother transition, but for everyday daily training, 40-minute, 50-minute runs, I do think the Ride 18 is doing perfectly well. If I was spending my own money, I'd probably save the $50 and get the Ride 18 instead of the Skyflow. Longer runs though, I might go up to the Skyflow for its smoother feel. The Magnify Nitro 2 to me is the perfect replacement for the Skyflow at a lower budget price point. I think this Nitro foam here has a good balance of resilience and softness where you feel like you get enough sinking to be comfortable, but it doesn't bottom out, it doesn't become mushy. It just has that kind of nice buttery smooth transition, especially over those longer runs. I think this shoe is fantastic. Nice grippy outsole, more stretch through the upper, which is going to accommodate more feet. $230, frequently discounted down. I'm going for the Magnify Nitro 2 pretty much every day of the week over the Skyflow. The 1080 V14 from New Balance I think falls into a similar category of being a little bit pricier, having a bit of an outdated midsole foam. I think this has a bit more compression than the Skyflow, so it's a bit more comfortable for kind of recovery, easy day, daily training, whereas the Skyflow with a bit more firmness underfoot does have a bit more pickup and a bit more long range versatility. If I was going just for those everyday daily training runs, I'd go for the 1080, but pushing into kind of all round versatility, bit more pace because of that firmer feel, I'm gonna lean the Skyflow. 270 versus 280, both around that same price point anyway. The Nova Blast 5 is another shoe which is coming in at a lower price point, which I think will appeal to more people. It does have a lighter weight. It is a little bit softer and more compressive underfoot, which is going to suit a lot of people who like that soft compressive feel. For myself, I did find this to be a bit mushy, so I did lean more towards the Skyflow when in my rotation. firmer feel, bit more resilience, just felt a bit more gutsy underfoot, whereas I did kind of feel like I was running on quicksand in the Nova Blast, which was not my favorite feeling. So if you like softer shoes, you should definitely go for the Nova Blast 5. But if you're resonating with what I'm saying around running on quicksand and feeling like you bottom the shoe out, the Skyflow could be the solution to that if you can pick it up on discount and match it to the Nova Blast. The Adidas Supernova Prima is another shoe which is quite similar in terms of stiffness, stability, a little bit more of a firm traditional feel with a slight rocker off the toe. For myself, I enjoyed the Supernova Prima a little bit more when getting up onto the forefoot. I do think this Dream Strike Plus foam does have a good bit of juice when you put a bit of compression into it, but if you sit back on your heel a little bit more, I do think the energy rod setup can be a little bit clunky. So heel strikers and people who like a little bit more of a smooth transition will probably lean more towards the Skyflow. Whereas if you do like a bit more of a kind of sharp, aggressive toe off, I do think the Supernova Prima with that traditional feel and a little bit more guts up in the forefoot might be a better pick. Between the two, there's not a lot of difference, I don't think, overall. 250 versus 280, slightly in the Prima's advantage, but overall very similar use cases. So yeah, overall for me, the Hoka Skyflow was a decent shoe, one which I had a reasonable time in, but not one that I would go raving about, and it does make it a little bit tricky when you come around to that $280 price point. I think if you can pick this shoe up on discount, match it to some of these entry-level daily trainers, I think that could be a good shout. I do think there is a spot for a shoe like this, but at $280, I think it's suffering to the competition, and it's suffering to other shoes which are more dynamic, more exciting, like a Neo Zen or an Evo SL or any of those other super trainers as well. So yeah, bit of a no man's land situation, but on discount could be a decent pickup. Little bit of a way to go for Hoka. Be interesting to see how they update this one.